So, Mr. Davison, how are you?
Good. How about yourself?
Pretty good. So, I'm excited to get into this because we've only recently known each other since, obviously right before you joined the brokerage. And I know that you were an underwriter, before, and you were an underwriter for quite a while. But I'm curious about your life, leading up to that. Where'd you grow up? How was high school like? What did you want to do for a living? What did you go to college for if you went to college? All of those things. So kind of give me that rundown of your high school life and all that.
I grew up in a small town, southeast Ohio, Gallipolis, Ohio, 100-acre cattle farm. So in the mornings, just before school, I'd have to bust up ice if it was winter time, so that way the cows could drink. And then obviously I went to high school, and then I went to college at Marshall University and graduated with a degree in business and then a minor in economics.
Did you change your major at all? Or did you
No.
you just went in and stayed the same? Because the majority of people change or at some point,
Yeah, most of the people that I knew did change majors, or they just didn't finish.
Right.
Because it's the first taste of self-motivation that you kind of get, and I was very. It was instructed to me to complete this.
Yeah, I got
so
you.
I did.
Yeah, we have an intern in here now who it's May-ish is when he needs to make a decision on college, and he was chatting with Grant and Ben and I last week about which college to go to and whatnot. And we were kind of explaining to him, like, the vast majority of people I know went into college with the intent of a one career and went in a different direction, because when you're in high school, you don't really know what you want to do. You're assessing your whole life, and you're like, in my opinion, you're not fully an adult yet. So you're just kind of like, what sounds cool, and something that you would like to do or whatnot. And then you get into college, which is a little bit more real life. You move in, get new friends and whatnot, in a new city or state sometimes, you know what I mean? And things change. So, the fact that you kind of stuck to your guns, economics, and then eventually led to your career as in the lending world, it seems like you at least had a understanding of yourself somewhat young,
I did, but there wasn't a lot of guidance either at that time. It was just kind of like, when you talk about business, going in for business, it was just general business.
Yeah.
Obviously now as adults, we kind of know that there's all kinds of different types of business. You can do real estate business, you can do a financial services business, you can do a t-shirt business,
Yeah.
You can do all kinds of things. And you think sometimes that you have to go in to learn about business, but often, if I knew what I knew now, there would be so many things that I could have just started doing without the preconceived idea.
You just learn on the fly.
Exactly.
That's what the younger generation right now is doing. They're learning that, like, a degree is fine, I guess, but like, you're going to get more value out of experience.
That's pretty much the way that, anytime that I've ever submitted a resume, they basically look at my work experience. They don't care where I went to school.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to school at Marshall University in West Virginia. It's not Harvard, it's not Ohio State, it's,
They more or less want to see, just like you said, they want to see that you can stick it through and you don't just bail out of it halfway through or whatnot. So.
Yeah, and I'd say that the kids these days have it a little bit more challenging because right now, like, artificial intelligence is changing so fast. The job that they may be going to school for right now may not be there 4 years later.
Yeah. You just have to be more creative, I think. I think if you're able to be creative and your mind works in a way where you can understand a way to use those tools to benefit you, I think you'll have, some type of leverage. But the basic stuff is going to go away. I mean, it's probably very similar to people who are our age back in 1995. They're probably like, this internet thing is going to ruin everything. And just like that, it's like the people who understood the internet and how to leverage it early, even the most basic forms of, like, internet, like the most basic things that we would think of today, people made billions of dollars on it in 1995 to 2003 or whatever, So I think that's probably the AI thing. Now, AI, the scarier part to me is how fast it's evolving. Like it's evolving like insanely fast.
Right.
But yeah, it is scary for the younger generation. So they're gonna have to figure it out. But they grew up with technology. You know, we kind of grew up like before technology, and then pretty bad technology, and now we're getting into like the good stuff. You know,
Right.
they were born into like pretty good technology. So they're half robots already.
Yeah, I had one of those machines called a pre-computer 2000, and it just had like a little screen that was as big as my fingers, and it just taught you how to type. That was my first.
Yeah.
It's
It's
come a long way.
Yeah. So you went to Marshall. You graduated. Did you start working there, or did you move here? Did you move back right after?
I started working down there as I did collections for a bank. Then I went into being a teller.
So that's sales. I mean, collections is sales to a degree.
Absolutely. Well, yeah.
I mean,
it's
sales in the sense of like you're going on the hunt.
You are going on the hunt, and they actually had me be one of the repo men.
Yeah,
I
nice.
would go with one of my other coworkers, and we would actually go in and repossess the vehicles. But you had to definitely be able to identify opportunities for people to either refinance or find a better solution than what they were currently in, because obviously there was a struggle there. So you had to assist them with making it through. And then once I hit a teller position, that was definitely getting into sales, where you had to identify whether somebody needed a CD or a new savings account, or if they made mention about buying a house, you would refer them to get a mortgage. So most of my initial sales is all about learning how to refer.
Well, and that's what sales is. A lot of sales is just listening, having a conversation with the client or the customer or whoever you're dealing with, and then figuring out their position, what they need, and then, like in your case, when in the banking, the teller world, like you said, what kind of bank accounts will best benefit them or whatnot, you know what I mean? Or in the collection side, like, okay, obviously you can't pay this whole thing today, but like, what is your situation? How much do you make per month or whatever? How much can you give us? You know what I mean? But you have to essentially be able to listen to then be able to get what you need out of them.
For sure.
So, and to benefit them. So that's interesting. Any interesting repo stories?
Yes, there was an individual that we were going to go and repossess his vehicle. And I remember him saying that you can come and get it, but you might get shot. And then, so we sent the sheriff, and this was in a very backwoods area of rural Appalachia. And the sheriff went to go repossess this vehicle, and he brought back just an engine. So the guy had stripped the whole vehicle. And, the sheriff did not get shot at, but he did take the engine back.
Nice.
There wasn't a lot we could do with just the engine.
Yeah, I was at Starbucks just around the corner not that long ago, sometime in the last 12 months, and I was in the drive-through line, and a tow truck came like flying up kind of next to me, and then like fast enough for it to catch my attention. And then the guy like got out, walked over, looked at something. And I still didn't know what he was doing. I was like, what the heck? He looked at something, jumped back in his truck. And this guy, I've never seen, this dude was a NASCAR driver. He boom, backed up, lifted this car. It was like a Range Rover, and took off in a minute and a half. I was like, holy crap, this guy is a professional.
Yeah, that's what you could do. We had keys pre-made before we would go on a repo trip, and we would wait. And we had people out there that were spies, so to speak, and they would say, hey, this person's at this restaurant or this person's at this store. And we would go and we would repossess the vehicle, because a lot of times they'd put their vehicle in their garage or whatnot, or hide it. And so you had to wait until they're out in public. And so if they're at the store, they might just come out and find their vehicle gone. I mean, it's sad, but at the same time, that's kind of how you had to do it, because oftentimes people didn't want to willfully surrender their vehicles.
Yeah, I remember that was pretty, I mean, it happened, I don't even think I had moved one spot yet. So that's how fast it happened. It was pretty exciting. I texted Kelsey, I'm like, oh, this just happened. pretty crazy. So, all right. So, yeah. So you went from that kind of broke you into the banking world, it sounds like, a little bit.
Yeah, and then I ended up going into a position of a relationship manager, which is basically, taking people's or working with people's savings and helping them do a little bit of investments. So I was licensed as Series 6 and 63, so I could do different mutual funds or annuities or whatnot. Simpler investments, and then also I could do small loans like car loans, or if somebody needed to do a CD secure loan, or different types of lending I was able to do, credit cards.
And you got like commissions on those?
They were incentives at the end of the quarter that you would get.
Crazy. It was like a fully commission based type position. It was more of like a customer service, like you're going to win by helping these people out type of deal.
Correct.
I gotcha.
And I mean, you had goals that you had to hit at being at that. So every individual in there, whether you're a relationship manager or the branch manager, you had certain goals that you had to hit for the branch. And then later on, I became a branch manager and had lending authority assigned to me. So then I could, if somebody came in and they said, I need $5,000 for X, I could pretty much give them the underwrite their whole lending picture right then and there in front of me, and have a check waiting for them right there at my desk.
I got you. So what moved you back up here? Work
to Columbus?
Yeah.
Yeah, I ended up from being a branch manager and loan officer in a smaller town. I ended up taking a job with one of the largest banks in the world and doing mortgage underwriting with them. And it was just a way for me to hyper-focus my career and become an expert in the real estate world.
Yeah.
As it became for the mortgages. And so I focused on that, and it was just a better situation. And my wife was from up here in Hilliard, and so we ended up making our lives up here.
Yeah. I know I told you this when we met the one day at Starbucks when you were interviewing brokerages, but I've always joked with you about how underwriters to me are like ghosts. I told you before I met you, I've never met an underwriter in my life. Right. I know they're out there because they just love to mess up deals.
Yes.
And we joked about how you're like, well, you've probably met them, but they just say they're in banking. They don't say I'm an underwriter, especially if they find out you're a realtor. They're not going to necessarily say you're an underwriter. But yeah, every time I see you, I feel like I'm talking to a ghost sometimes. Like, is this guy even real?
They are real. They're out there. They just say that they're in banking. It's a little easier and it's a little less off-putting.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't even understand what the role is. So as opposed to going into the long conversation of explaining what it is, it was just easier to say banking.
And since you worked at a big corporate bank instead of like more of a local place, you were dealing with, I'm sure, loan officers from like all over the place. It's not like you're in a small office, so you got Steve or you got Diane or whoever that you're regularly working with. Did you deal with certain people regularly or no?
You would see some names that would come up more than others, but in general, you're dealing with mortgage officers from all across the country, whether they were in small branches or from a centralized.
So you didn't really have them like trying to chummy up with you to, because they're like the chances I run into Scott again are slim.
Nothing like that. It was very systematic and production based. So they would come into my screen and I would just work them. But as far as getting a hold of us,
there's some loopholes that they could find ways to get a hold of you?
Well, they could call us or email us and we could talk with them, but really our hands were tied a lot of times.
It's because the amount of like policies and procedures, it's like everything is on a very fine, there's not any gray area there.
Not a lot, but what I did find was that when you do talk with the mortgage representative, you can often find that there were ways that you could counter a file. So if a file was essentially broken to where it wasn't getting an approval in the current manner, you might find that just from talking with that person, that maybe they know somebody that has the ability to add additional funds to the transaction to make that transaction work. And so I could condition a file based off of that answer, conditional upon a gift letter, from so and so, and then
Kind of giving them the heads up, like, I know you haven't brought this up to me, lender or buyer, but if you can come up with this,
Right.
we could get it done. Whereas like another underwriter might just let it die. Like, sorry,
just let it die.
So, okay, that's interesting. So did you enjoy the underwriting side of it? Like, or the underwriting career?
It had its place. It
Yeah.
had its place. I did enjoy it because it was a lot of problem solving. And I enjoy puzzles. I enjoy problem solving as, all my life. And so when I was able to talk with the mortgage people and help come up with those solutions to make things work, it was satisfying. And so, yeah, I did enjoy it, but obviously it was just it's another stepping stone in my life and in my career.
Yeah, I mean, during COVID, everything in every industry got shifted around. And so that's when it sounds like from our previous conversations, you decided to look into other facets. And from our conversations, you were like, I really just want to have a career where I'm more in control of the ups and the downs, which is entrepreneurship, I guess, as a whole,
Right.
And you knew it would be a bit of a slow start. I know, you didn't necessarily have a slow start, but, again, there's ups and downs to it. You know what I mean? You're going from a life of consistency as far as income goes to a life of, again, you're in control of it, but sometimes no matter how much you do, you seem like you're not getting anything back. What you'll see, and you, in my opinion, you've already kind of stumbled into is, there will be other times when you're like, you're not doing anything and like deals kind of just come to you and you're like, what the heck is going on here? Right. So when you're going through the tough times, you got to remember that, the deals are looming. And then when you're going through the super easy times, you got to know that this was not going to last forever. Just kind of be happy that it's happening and expect it to end tomorrow, But it's a bit of a psychological battle being in our industry,
I would say that 100% that it definitely is. And that's kind of like, that's one of the things about being an entrepreneur is that self-motivation, even when it is tough or hard, no matter what's happening around you, is finding that motivation to continue to press through and, making things happen out of nothing.
Yeah.
Essentially.
That's what you have to do. You just have to trust the process, as dorky as that is, but it is the truth, because if you don't fall in love with the process, you're going to just get frustrated and give up because the results don't come. Like even if you look out and you get licensed and you just fall into a deal in your first couple months just out of, luck, after that you will inevitably, if you're not doing the things, the results don't come. They just take time. It compounds year over year. You'll do a couple of deals your first year, 4 deals your second year, X amount of deals your next year, and in those first few years, when you're only doing 2 deals or 4 deals in an entire year, I mean, think of how many months there are where you're not doing anything. And those are all just stress-filled months, even days, So yeah, it's a lot. But again, if you can figure out a way to make your week by week systematic, you know what I mean? Like we've talked about countless times, you come in here a couple of times a week pretty systematically and work on things and are constantly coming up with a new idea of like, what can I do differently? Or the thing that I'm doing, how can I tweak it a little bit to make it 5% better? I mean, that's kind of just the game of real estate. It's just after you've done it for 5, 10, 15 years, you just realize that's what you do every day, So, but for me, it's like it's a love-hate relationship, because sometimes you wish it was just like the same thing. You weren't having to be worried about what's next year going to be like. I don't know. You wish it wasn't like that, but also I like the creativity, because then when you do a thing, like for you, when you leave things at people's doors with, info about their city and your info, eventually someone's going to call you from that and you'll be like, this is awesome because I am the reason. I know my creativity and my thought process is the reason that this came about. It wasn't because my work gave it to me or even my team lead gave it to me or whatever it is. It was like fully like your work and your creation resulted in this client that you're working with. You know what I mean? So that's the rewarding part. But again, the problem is that the rewarding part takes a long time.
Yeah, forever.
Exactly. Yes.
I would agree 100%. And, there's rewarding moments as well. Like, I was even talking to somebody the other day, and I was having a good conversation, and she was telling me about how her parents have a house that's coming up that they need to list. She just wants to list it as is. Turned out that house is in Pennsylvania, so I can't do anything with it.
Yeah.
But this person identified me as their go-to person for that situation, that real estate situation. She will eventually have a real estate situation in Ohio.
Yep.
But that person didn't call anybody else, recognized that this is what I do now.
Yep.
So I've done the job of rebranding myself as the banking person to real estate person. And I feel like I've accomplished in showing people that I can be a guide down the river as opposed to them having to figure out the rapids themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I've told you this from that first day we met. There's lenders or there's realtors out there that was a lender at one point and they got the real estate license. You being an underwriter is like having that passed. I mean, you're like completely the full package. You know what I mean? Like you can give them advice on the whole process. Whereas for me with my clients, I can advise them on lending. I purposefully know enough lending to be able to answer simple stuff, but I don't want to go too deep into details because also the lending world changes a good bit. Like, rates are changing every single day. Different types of loans are being offered here and there, wherever. So, I always will defer most of the time to the lender. Like, hey, talk to your lender about this. But, you could vet your clients. If they say, hey, I want to buy in 6 months from now or whatever, they can explain their financial situation to you. And if they explain it to you or if they explain it to me, you're going to be able to tell them 100%. This is exactly what I'm already telling you right now. It's going to go to the lender and the lender is essentially going to pass it off to me. And this is what would be the red flag. So you need to fix these things now so that when it's time to buy, we're not going to deal with this. You know what I mean? So that's like a massive leg up. Again, like we just said, I don't really know any other underwriters, so the fact that you have that, notch in your belt is a humongous leverage point for why clients should want to use you, because the home buying process, there's a zillion realtors out there, you know what I mean? Like you have to set yourself apart from, first being relatable, being somebody that is trustworthy, which obviously you've got those down, but then beyond that, it's like what extra information can you provide that the client can find useful? And like the lending side is, 50% of the deal, and you've got the keys to that. So that's huge. So I'm sure clients are gonna, want to tap into that as you use them.
Yeah, I mean, working for one of the largest banks in the world, I was able to see thousands of transactions, literally, and I've seen what makes a deal be successful, even when it appears to be broken. And that is one of the things that I can kind of provide as a foresight from the very beginning of a transaction. If I know, hey, if you're buying a house right now, don't buy the car.
Right.
Buy the car later.
Yeah.
Number one objective is to get the house, because if you buy the car or if you're buying the furniture right now, you could mess up your ratios, or you mess up your funding in some way.
Right.
So keep your eye on the prize and then look at the other things afterwards. Seeing that foresight from the very beginning saves somebody the heartache that could come just before closing.
Yeah. It's amazing how many agents don't provide that insight or heads up or warning. There's a lot of agents who just fly through a deal by the seat of their pants and don't educate their clients on, all right, now that once you get pre-approved, like you said, kind of chill on your finances, just save essentially. And
Right.
and then they get all frustrated when the deal falls apart because, like you said, their client got in contract on a house and then went and financed a whole bunch of furniture for it. And it's like, dude,
Yeah.
you just killed the deal.
And I've seen it.
Yeah, I know. And that's what I'm saying. So again, being able to lean into your experience, like at this point, you have to have seen almost everything. I'm sure there's, in your mind, like a pretty common denominator of like things that, of course there's always gonna be outliers, but when you've seen the number of deals that you've seen, you're probably like, the things that kill deals, I know what they are.
Yeah.
And you're able to identify them and ask the correct questions when you're meeting a client. You know what I mean? Like if you were to follow me around when I'm my first couple showings, even as experienced as I am, you'd probably be like, Jordan, you should probably be asking this. Or when they told you that, you probably should have followed up with this question, because as an underwriter, that's a big red flag to me, or whatever. You know what I mean? So yeah, again, it's just like, that's huge for you that you have that background and all the years. It's not like you did for 1 year.
Yeah, it was almost 10 years of mortgage underwriting experience or related, and it I guess it does come back to the analogy I was making with the going down the river with a guide. Being from the West Virginia area, whitewater rafting was big. And you could go down the river on your own. Exactly. You might want to say your prayers.
Yeah.
But you knew that there were guides with experience that knew which rocks to avoid, which spots or currents might be a little bit easier. So you could definitely go and get through it on your own. You might be dead or have bruises.
Yeah.
But you knew there was a surer way. And so to try to be that guide for people and take them down and avoid those spots where they could flip the boat is, that I've found that to be very rewarding.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I'm sure you've learned a lot through your years of underwriting, and you're only a few years now into the real estate game. But you've done a handful of deals. So what are some of the bigger lessons that you've learned since being an agent? Maybe not even like involving in a transaction itself, but maybe just about being an agent, or what are some of your biggest takeaways that you can think of so far, being newish?
Being newish, I would say some of the bigger things are to continue to stay focused on the little incremental goals. Make sure that make sure that when you get somebody new in front of you that's experiencing you for the first time, that you listen more than you talk. And so that's usually what I do. And at first, I was, may have been trying to show my advice a little bit too much. Well, that wasn't necessarily what somebody wants to hear. Right. They come and they want to know. They want to basically express more about what they want done. And then they want you to provide the solution. They don't want you to necessarily provide the solution before they presented the problem.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it'd be like going to a car dealership and the car dealer walking out and be like, hey guys, I've sold 42 cars this month and I'm one of our top guys, and I used to work at this car dealership, and they're like, do you care at all about what I
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never really thought about it that way. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it is huge in the beginning to listen to the client. You kind of casually build the trust with the client over time just by being able to answer their questions.
Right.
You know what I mean? So yeah, that's a pretty big one. You've had some pretty interesting transactions.
I've had some interesting transactions, and sometimes when somebody's going through a transaction, whether they're close to you or not, it's one of the biggest transactions in their life. And so there's going to be a deal of stress that comes with that. And one of the things that I've learned is to always keep your mind on being as professional as possible. Separate your own emotions or even what you think from the emotion of the transaction itself. And as long as you stay focused on being professional and acknowledging, hey, this person is going through a very stressful situation. This person needs an additional explanation or needs an additional text message or phone call. Taking the time and the compassion to go through that process for them, I've learned is a very, very big thing. Because, people know you and they know they've been either friends or family and so their, expectations of you are a little bit higher sometimes. And so the stress can be a little bit heavy.
Yeah.
And so just knowing that they're not only trusting you as a friend or a family member, but as a professional.
Right.
And so the number one thing needs to be to put the professionalism above the rest of it.
Right. Well, and the fact that you even consider it stressful is because you care. If you didn't care at all, it wouldn't be stressful.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And we've ran into plenty of agents that probably don't stress that much. You get what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
So yeah, and our industry is crazy because there's a lot of different ways that stress can come at you. Like you're discussing, with clients, they're stressed. It's a huge thing for them. A lot of them, maybe they're unsure if they should make this big of a commitment. Or maybe a husband and a wife are kind of butting heads on where they want to live or how big of a house they want or their budget or whatever it is. So there's from the client side. Then there's from the other agent side. You'll deal with maybe a newer agent or a more experienced agent than you. But there can be times when you're butting heads with the agent. There could be times where I've had times where the client is stressing me out a little bit because they're tiptoeing around making good offers. I'm like, just make a little bit better of an offer or whatever. And then my stress will then kind of go over onto the other agent because like they're like complaining at me about making a better offer. And I'm like, I'm freaking trying to get you as good of an offer. They're not listening to me. So there's like so many different angles that stress can hit us. And then when we're working a deal or two at the same time or 3 or 4 deals at the same time, you know what I mean? It can definitely be a lot, But again, it's our job to be the level-headed one. Trust me, if 90% of my deals, if the clients that I have said what they say to me to the other side, the deal would die right there, So we got to be a filter. That's like our primary job, really.
I agree with that 100%. Like you know that when somebody uses some choice language on one side, that's not going to go over very well. So you have to put it in a very politically correct and professional manner to communicate that because they're not trying to kill the deal. They're expressing the emotion of, that fight or flight feeling that comes into negotiations.
Yeah.
And that's why the middleman in between is so vital because that emotion gets removed.
Yeah.
You're still a human. You still get these emotions, but for us to make things happen, we present it in a professional way, minus the choice words, minus the emotion.
And just managing their emotions, like if we see a house at 5 o'clock at night and you can tell that they're super eager, like they're just emotional. You've known kind of throughout the process, these are emotional people. When they find a house, they fall in love with it. They fall head over heels in love with it more than they should, And so you might be like, all right, you guys really like it. Yeah, we want to submit an offer. And I might say like, well, let's just sleep on it. And then, you know what I mean? If you wake up tomorrow still as eager as you are, then let's do it. But, sometimes that you're also like kind of coaching or like, I don't know, parenting them in a way where, you're trying to just make sure that they're making the right decision. Because if they do make an emotional decision and put in a crazy offer and it gets accepted, inevitably those emotions, whether it's the next day or the next week, they're going to subside. And then you're just going to have to terminate a deal. So it's like, again, I would rather just say, hey, let's just sleep on it, make sure you still feel this way tomorrow. And then we'll just submit it in the morning or whatever.
Yeah. And building on that, generally what I've learned at the very beginning of those when I'm showing a house, I stick to the professionalism and I'll tell them, hey, this one has this crack right here in the foundation. That's probably going to show up on the inspection. Keep that on your radar. And if that's something that you want to battle for the next 30 days.
Right.
And they may have really loved the top of the house. They may have had everything that they've wanted, but then to see the one crack
Well, if they're emotional people, like they're going to look at the house through rose-colored lenses or whatever that phrase is. You know what I mean? They're going to be like, "Oh, this place is so awesome." So again, it's your job to. I always say it's kind of our job to do the opposite of whatever is going on. If they hate the place and I think it's not that bad, I'll kind of point out some of the better things to them. And then if they're head over heels in love with the place, which happens more often, and it's a disaster, you got to be like, yo, like you said, the basement wall's caving in here.
Right. Yeah. And that's the level where we remove the emotion.
Yeah.
They have the emotion going in, how much love that they have for the property, but it is our job as guides and as professionals to show them, well, yes, this is there too. This is there too. You might want to think about that and give them that level-headed advice to help them make a more complete decision.
Yeah, at least an informed decision to know, like, hey, you're not going to waste $500 on an inspection. Like, you know what I mean? Or like you said, you pointed it out. They understand it. They're still willing to at least take the risk of getting the inspection done. And then after the inspection, if they decide to terminate, they decide. But, again, yeah, that's 100% our job is to advise. And that's why it's rewarding, because we are helping them. Sometimes we're the bearer of bad news, but we're only the bearer of bad news that day. Right. The next day or a couple of days later, they realize like, oh, thank you, Scott, for keeping me on the tracks here. So it almost always works out for the better. But yeah, the real estate world has been, an interesting journey for you. And then piggybacking into just entrepreneurship in general, we've kind of already touched on it, but your previous careers were W-2 jobs, consistent income, and this and that. And then you just took the jump and said, hey, I'm going to, put the ball in my court here. And how has that been? The ups and the downs and being in control of everything. How has that been from your perspective?
You go from, when you're a 9-to-5 worker, that you go and you do your thing, and then you come back home. You on your journey back home anyway, you fight through an hour and a half of traffic, and then you need time to wind down. And by the end of all of it, between getting ready and the end of the day, you're spending probably not 8 hours, but probably 12 hours. And what I've realized, being in this world where you are an entrepreneur, you are self-employed, you are self-motivated, and you may be working 24 hours a day, but it is a way different type of stress.
It doesn't feel the same.
It doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel like your hands are tied. You're still doing the things that you have to do, but it's a totally different type of stress.
Yeah, I always think of, if I had to get up, if my work said, hey, you need to get up at 6 a.m. tomorrow to come in, I would probably be like, I'll just call off. I'll just use a vacation day. But if I had a client who works second shift or something, and they're like, we only can see that house at 6:30 in the morning, I probably wouldn't have any problem getting up that early. Because it's for me. It's like for my business, for my, and so that in the simple form is a good example of entrepreneurship. It's like you're doing it for you, and it doesn't feel like work. Like I wouldn't have gotten up to go do a showing and told Kelsey, hey, I'm going to work today. It's like, oh, I'm just going to go do a thing.
Yeah.
Like buying groceries for people. Like every person buys groceries.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think of it as work. It's just a thing you have to do that day to survive.
Right.
That's how showing houses is, or whatever it is. You're pulling comps or whatever, So yeah, I almost never say I'm going to work, because to me, work is like somewhere you don't want to be, and you have to be there for a set amount of time, like a W-2 job. So yeah, it is interesting. And then the other side of it that I didn't love was no matter how hard you work or how poorly the person next to you works, generally you're going to get paid the same, unless you go completely. It's like these two lines on this table. As long as you stay in this zone, you're fine. Even if this is the positive side, even if you're all the way over here, you can go infinitely on the positive side.
Yeah.
But as long as you're in this buffer, as long as you don't cross this line on the bad side, you're not going to get fired. You'll probably just get talked to every so often.
Yeah.
And it's annoying when you're this person over here working your ass off, and going above and beyond. And like you were explaining earlier in the underwriting world, like, I'm salvaging deals that these lenders aren't even coming up with the ideas of how to salvage a deal. And then you got Steve at the cubicle next to you who's just like messing up all these underwrites and all this, and he still has a job and getting paid similar to what you're getting paid.
I actually do have a buddy named Steve that's an underwriter,
So,
but he's really nice.
Yeah.
He's a really good guy.
But that's where, in our world, like, we could be sitting here in the office and that there's an agent sitting 2 seats away from you who just doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
And they're not going to get deals. Whereas if you're out busting your ass doing this, that, and the other, you will inevitably get business and make more money because of that.
Yeah, and I noticed that too, as your job does come into conflict with family life. Even just this week, my daughter had to be picked up from school because she had a common rash, not contagious or anything like that, but she needed to come home from school, go to the doctor. I had to do that. If I was in the typical 9-to-5 world, that would have been a way more stressful situation.
Right, yeah.
I would have had to leave, tell my boss, come back and do this. But instead, I was able to do what I needed to do at home, take her home and make sure that she was cared for in the right way. And that was not stressful. But that, to me, is a number one job of mine, that I'm able to kind of meld with my career and my family,
Right.
as opposed to it being one or the other.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It can all blend together. I remember because my last job was working in an apartment community in the leasing office. And so, you're in there. I think we'd have to get in at either 8 or 9 in the morning until 4 or 5 at night. I think it was 5 every night. And I remember like my first couple weeks of like not doing that and being a realtor. At that point, I was like more of a house flipper, I would just like drive around like 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. I'm like, this is crazy. Because my whole life, you're going to school, so you have to be somewhere set amount of time. You kind of go to college. College, you have a little bit more freedom, but like, I don't know. Your college years, you're not like taking life too seriously. Like, you understand that that's like a little bit of like a break in the 9-to-5 world. And then, like after college, you go back to the 9-to-5 thing. So I was doing the 9-to-5 thing for a while. And then, I remember like, I kind of vividly have a few memories of like driving on 71 at, like 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. And you're like, whoa, like, I feel like I'm skipping school right now. And then it just kind of becomes your whole life as you can just do whatever you want, whenever you want. Now, we see that in the real estate industry as a huge negative for a lot of people. Like, they get into this industry and they're like, I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. And then they just don't do anything. So it becomes a discipline game, Yes, you have freedom. You need to use that freedom, to be productive. And that's what a lot of people don't do.
Well, speaking of that, I remember on the opposite end of the equation, being a 9-to-5 worker and then having to drive on 71 to transport something or going to a conference or whatever. And I'd see all these people on the road.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the hell do these people do?
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, and it was the first time I remember questioning the 9-to-5 world. I'm thinking, what are these people doing? They're driving nice cars. They look like they're professional, and here I am, miserable, or I don't want to be in the traffic, and I know that I'm going to have to be in traffic at the end of the day. That's kind of making me grumpy about that. But I always wondered what those people were doing. So while you were driving and doing your thing, like, this is awesome. I'm on the other side thinking, what is that guy Jordan doing?
That's how I felt this first couple weeks. I was like, what are all these other people doing? Has everyone skipping school today? Has everyone quit their job today? What's going on? Yeah, it is interesting. And then you kind of get used to it. But I had that same thought just last week. I was at Aldi, and there was again like a Tuesday at whatever, 11 a.m. or something. And there was a good amount of people. I'm like, what the hell is, so it's still a little, you're like, there's no way all these people are in real estate. Right. What are they all doing? So yeah, it's definitely interesting, but yeah. So then tell me, like you were mentioning your daughter and everything, like, let's go into family life. You're a dad, you have a couple kids, right?
Yep.
2. Yeah. So how old were you Well, let's go into having your first kid. Were you guys planning on having our first kid?
We tried for 2 years before we finally got pregnant. So I know that was a very traumatizing time for my wife. I just kept saying, it'll come when it comes.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were trying. We love our children very much.
Yeah. Because I'm assuming now, again, kind of like you just hinted at, like leaving the 9 to 5. That's probably been a huge upside, is like being able to be there for the kid. I mean, your kids are in school. Oh, your older one's in school, so
Yeah.
Now she's got the 9 to 5.
Now she's got the 9 to 5.
But at least like summers and whatnot, you can be around and so I'm sure it's helped family life in that manner, like being able to have freedom.
Well, as you know, my son was born last year. Way early, born at 25 weeks, and that was really the catalyst to doing the flip from the 9 to 5 to the realtor world. To do this full time and to make this life was because it enabled the opportunity to be there for my son and for my family, to help transition us through, because he had lung disease, and so he came home on oxygen, and so it would have been really expensive to send him to have nursing care at the daycare place. So we just made the family decision to make the jump into making me be his full-time caregiver during the day, and then because most showings are done at night, I can still talk to people during the day as I'm taking care of my son, and my in-laws definitely help out a lot with this. And then so it's been a family thing to make it all happen, but it wouldn't have been possible. I don't know that had such a major event happen, that I would have got to see the beauty of being able to
Be there every day. Yeah, because I mean, you probably wouldn't have gotten like any kind of maternity leave, even though that was a pretty wild scenario. Like that was, and it was interesting how you documented the whole thing and everything. Like all of your friends and family appreciated the storytelling about that, because that was, you probably realized too, like, holy crap, I have quite a bit of people here, like banding together, like praying and hoping for a good outcome in this situation. But yeah, I mean, if you had a 9 to 5, I don't even know what their policies would be on that.
I had a good amount of paternity leave. I did have that opportunity to help kind of reassess life.
Yeah.
Be there, because when your child's in the NICU, it's kind of a 24-hour game.
Yeah.
And so there's no real way that I could even think of that you could have a child with that you needed to be there for physically, emotionally, for all their needs, and be able to keep your mind on a 9 to 5 job.
Right.
Even when that leave was expiring, it became very obvious that my son would need one of us there.
Yeah.
And as a family, we kind of came to this conclusion that we would have one stay home and be there for him, but then also be able to use real estate to kind of help us make it through that time. And it's been very, we've been very fortunate that we've been able to do both.
Right.
And I wouldn't have been able to do that in a 9 to 5.
Yeah, and I know you wrote a book on the whole situation that people can purchase online. And what would you say are some of your biggest takeaways from that experience?
Well, I would say that, when you are tested, and sometimes life can test every little fabric of whatever you're made up of.
Push you to the limits.
It can push you. And it will test to see which are the weakest strings first. And some of those strings will break, but at the end, when you rebuilt and you come back, you do find that that was a time that made you actually stronger, and some of those strings just needed to be replaced.
Yeah.
Some of the strings that were just holding you together, maybe they were just threads. And, the more threads that you wrap around itself, eventually that becomes a rope and makes it way stronger than what you were originally with.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you all go through those things in life. I've used the analogy of like you're going through life and, you kind of have somewhat of a vision of what, like right now it's spring. Like I have somewhat of a vision of what my summer is going to look like. You know what I mean? Like I have a general idea or my fall and but then something just comes out of left field and a bomb drops in front of you. Like you were fine, but you have no vision now of what's in front of you, and then so it's shocking when it happens, and then there's all this smoke, and like you just kind of keep trucking along the path that you knew. You know what I mean? Like, but you can't see what's in front of you anymore because of all the smoke and all that. But you just have to keep going through it. You know what I mean? And that's what's scary about it is you have to have the confidence to keep trucking along. And just like you said, for me at least, every single time something crazy's happened, it's super stressful, but you do end up better on the other side. Whether it's because you reassess, like COVID is a huge example of this. COVID for the majority of the population was the bomb that dropped, and then people had to stop going to work for a certain amount of time. And then so it was, oh my gosh, how are we going to pay our bills? In that moment, it was, how are we going to pay our bills? In hindsight, for those people, it was let me assess, do I even like this career that I have? Or I need to figure out another way to make money temporarily. And they did something else that they ended up liking more or whatever it was, And so because that thing had happened and the smoke was there, they had to reevaluate. It makes you literally reevaluate, like, is this road that I'm on even the right road? Because as of right now, like I just said, I know how my spring and summer and fall are projected to look. And when you're in that, you're not really evaluating. You're not looking like straight downwards. You're looking more outwards at kind of like what are you looking forward to, the next vacation or whatever it is that you have upcoming, But you're not looking down at like, should I even be doing this right now?
Yeah.
And so those chaotic moments in the moment, they're terrible. But as long as you go about it the right way. You're not blaming outside things. You use it as a tool to reassess everything and are willing to make changes to put yourself in a better position. More times than not, you'll end up, better on the other side. It's just the unknown is the scary part, getting through the smoke.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I had gone through this situation, it slowed life down for me a lot. So, I mean, I could have one child throwing popcorn. I could have another child, spilling the bottle, and I could be completely zenned out. I mean, because the level that I've already been tested, it's already been done, and I can handle one situation and move to the other situation, and there not be much stress in it. And I've noticed that even when I'm applying, like even what would have been a stressful conversation or a stressful situation, even when it comes to a real estate conversation, I've noticed I'm just completely, focused on making sure that the best outcome is done.
Yeah.
The interest of the person that I'm working with is put above my own. And while it, at a 9-to-5 job, it probably would have been 10 times the stress. For me now, it's like slow motion, and I do what I have to do, even though it's not always easy. And before this, it probably would have been a lot more difficult. So my son has taught me a lot. He hasn't even been here, but 14 months, and I've learned an incredible amount from him.
Yeah, I mean, situations like that really make you assess how much stupid crap we stress about when the rubber meets the road and it's really something drastically important on the line. You're like, why did I care about the fact that it rained yesterday or whatever? You know what I mean? Like there's the vast majority of things that people stress about are nonsense,
Agree.
And so when you go through big things like that a couple times, you start to have a bit of a baseline understanding of like, even though I am stressed about this, I know it's nonsense or whatever. So then when you're helping clients and they're kind of stressing about nonsensical things, like you said, it keeps you level-headed. No, you're not going to necessarily say, hey, this is nonsense. You know what I mean? But like,
Right.
you're just not going to feed into their stress. It's not, they'll be stressful, they'll be stressed, and time will pass, but that keeps us level-headed, and then we can manage the deals for them. But yeah, the parenting life is interesting. Obviously, Kelsey and I don't have kids yet. But yeah, I'm just curious how I hear from so many people about when you're an entrepreneur again, and having children, because it's within your control. You know what I mean? Like, the next deal you get is going to help your wife and your kids and your family as a whole. You know what I mean? So I've heard from the majority of people that it's a huge benefit having kids and all that, because it pushes you. It's like a whole nother level of why to push you to be successful.
I agree with that 100%. And I've also found that there's three things really that, if you have a goal on, as a father and whatnot, it would be, making sure that your family has a stable place to live, consistency, routine, always has their belly filled, and then just have a lot of love in the house. I think those three things, as long as you stay focused on those, all the rest of it just comes. You naturally work to make sure that those three things happen.
Right.
So while I want another deal to come like right now,
Right.
it gives me comfort knowing that those three things in my family right now are fulfilled.
Yeah.
So everything else beyond that is just bonus.
Well, and you've seen with some of our bigger agents that are in the office, sometimes they're closing. You'll talk to them, like, I got 10 deals in contract. I got 15 deals in contract. They're more stressed than you are. And you're like, hey, you got freaking money coming.
Exactly.
So
You got the money.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you're closing, 5 deals a year or 25 deals a year. It's stressful. And like I said, one thing I've noticed with the bigger agents is they're more stressed when they're closing 50 deals a year than the ones who are closing 10. So it's almost a point to acknowledge or of the agents who are just closing their 10 deals a year or 15 deals a year or 7 deals a year, and they're just fine with that. Like, they've found peace with that. Like, the bigger agents are sometimes jealous of that person, and then that person is jealous of the bigger agent who's closing all the deals. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, it's just like, comparison is, whatever that analogy is, it's never a good thing to be comparing yourself consistently with other people, especially because you don't know their situations. You don't know how much free time they have, who knows what, the amount of connections that they're leveraging or whatever they're doing. Compare yourself to your previous year. You just want to make sure that you're doing more than what you did last year, because the way our industry works, you should be doing a little bit more year over year, just because you have more referrals and whatnot, and your name has gotten out there more and more with every day that passes. But just don't beat yourself up when you're not doing much. I mean, I just posted not that long ago about my last year's income of month to month, and there was more months than I would have liked to have seen where it was 0 in commission. I'm like, holy crap, what a bump, But it's but then you'll have another month where you'll have a whole bunch of commissions hit, and so. It all comes in waves, and I'm sure it's more stressful when you have a family, because you're like, holy crap, these $0 months cannot keep adding up. But you just have to keep yourself on the straight and narrow, like you said kind of earlier on, is just staying on the path, and keeping track of the day-to-day goals instead of the I want to sell 10 houses this year. Like the what am I supposed to do today goal? Am I doing that? Or what were the 3 big things I wanted to get done this week? And just make sure you're doing those 3 things every week. And then the deals will come, And then after 6 months, if you look back and you're like, I'm not hitting my big goal, then I need to readjust my weekly goals, Sure. That's kind of, again, that's our whole thing as realtors. So any other topics you want to hit on? I know we're about to run out of time here, so.
I just wanted to, I just wanted to know when I'm going to get a chance to ride in the DeLusso car.
Yeah. One day here soon. The weather's breaking, so yeah, we'll definitely take it on a ride sometime. So cool.
All right.
All right. Well, it was great chatting with you.
All right. Great chatting with you, bro.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks.
Good to go.
Right.
I think
Nice little ending.
I think Jared's here. I saw a ghost.